We're going to do some hardcore hard surface modeling today. We're not going to use any add-ons, no bullshit, just old school hard surface modeling. This is going to be episode 1 of a 3-part series where we're going to model this tripod right here, and today we're just going to model this central piece, which was the most fucked up part. Now, if you want to learn more about all the techniques that you're going to see me use in this video, I put everything that I know that I ever use in Blender in over 100 tutorials, 7 hours of content inside my Blender course, so you can sign up for that with the link in the description. And you're also going to join a big community of other 3D artists that are serious about this. We do regular live streams for how to level up as a professional, how to get your shit together in life in general, so you can check that out. And until then, let's get to work. Get rid of the default cube and instead add a UV sphere. The UV sphere has to have 64 segments and 32 rings. You can adjust that in this add UV sphere menu down here. Go to side view and select all the geometry on the lower half of this UV sphere and delete that. Then select this, extrude along the Z-axis by -3 units and create 29 loop cuts so that every single loop cut is aligned with one of these lines in the grid background. Now with Alt right click, we're gonna select a vertical edge loop exactly in the middle, and with Shift Alt right click, we're gonna select a horizontal edge loop down here near the bottom. We have to select an edge loop which is next to one of the thicker white lines that you can see right here. Now go Control Mark Seam. You also want to find the edge loop which is opposite to this one over here on the other side. That's going to be this one over here. Again, Control E Mark Seam. Now in face select mode, you can just use L to select this entire surface. We're going to go to side view and we're going to inset that with I like this. You want to bring it approximately 2/3 of the way to the next edge here. Now we're going to zoom in on this corner down here and you're going to select this exact vertex right here. If you look at this big intersection between these seams right here, you take the middle and you move 2 backwards and 2 up. This is the vertex that you want to select. Press Shift S, cursor to selected. Now in object mode, add a cylinder with 16 vertices. Flip that sideways so it's facing you like this. And you're going to scale that down so that it's aligned with this vertical inset edge right here. You can zoom in all the way to make sure it's aligned almost perfectly. You're never going to be able to get it completely right, but the closer you get there, the better. It doesn't matter too much at the end of the day. No one's going to see this shit anyway. Anyway, this is as close as we can get, so that's pretty good. Now we're also going to make sure that this cylinder pushes all the way through this main object here. Select the main object and add a new Boolean modifier from the generate section. Use the eyedropper to target this little cylinder down here. Apply the Boolean modifier. Get rid of the little cylinder. And now you got this big ass hole right here. We're going to go back to side view. Select the vertex at the bottom of this hole. Shift S, cursor to selected. And you're going to select this edge loop down here. And you're going to use a 3D cursor as a pivot point. Scale this to 0 on the Z axis so that this is aligned with the bottom vertex down here. Now select the next vertex right here with Shift S, cursor selected. Then snap this vertex to the 3D cursor with Shift S. Place the cursor on the next vertex and then select all the surrounding vertices, including this one. Scale that to 0 and then just place the cursor over here and snap the last vertex to that. Select everything, press M, merge by distance, and in face select mode, you're going to use L to select this entire area over here on the inside of what we inset here earlier. X, delete faces. Now you got this curve down here, which is going to allow us to create a perfect bevel. Was there an easier way to do this? Maybe. Go to top view and you're going to delete the other half, the other side of this shape, which does not have this curve which we just created. Place the 3D cursor in the middle and duplicate everything and scale it to -1 on the y-axis. Correct the normals and merge vertices by distance again. And now we're going to do something to fill up this lower surface down here. Select these 2 vertices which are on the intersections of the seams. Place the 3D cursor right there with Shift S. Then in object mode, you're going to add a circle with 64 vertices, which should have the same size as this, assuming you didn't change the size of this shape right here. And you're going to select that circle and go to face, grid fill. You're going to adjust the offset so that the geometry on this circle on the grid fill is aligned with the axes and the grid of the world. Delete 1/2 of that circle. Place the cursor up on this edge over here and scale this semicircle to 0 on the Z-axis. Now you can also delete these 2 edge loops over here and join this into the same object with Control J. Place the 3D cursor on this vertex over here. Take this and scale it to 0 on the X-axis. Then place the 3D cursor up here with Shift S and take this edge loop down here. Shift D, right click, scale to 0 with Shift Y, so you exclude the Y-axis from the scaling operation. And you might have to connect this, so place the 3D cursor out here and snap that to the end. Do the same thing over here on the other side. Merge vertices by distance and select this edge loop down here. You don't want any of the geometry up here above. So I'm going to use my brush select tool to deselect all this. Now I just have this down here. Go to face, grid fill, Blender should automatically figure out how to fill this properly. Now we got a nice little round corner here. Let's move on to the top part. At this point, we're going to duplicate this with Shift D in object mode and just place it somewhere else so we have a backup in case we fuck something up. Because anytime you're dealing with complex topology, you're bound to fuck something up. It's almost guaranteed that at some point you're going to want to go back to a point where you can't go because you don't have enough undo steps. So I just like to back that up with Shift D instead. Now we're going to go to front view where we're facing this hole in the middle of the shape right here. And we're going to use our knife tool to cut out some sort of shape over here, which is going to be a little dent on the side. We're going to start here and let's say we're going to end down here somewhere. So with K, I'll activate the knife tool. I'll place it right here. Click there and press C to enable cutting through. I'm going to bring this to down here somewhere. So that's exactly 3 faces down. I'm going to click there. And then when I go back, I want to go 6 more faces down. So let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to click on the outside over here. I think I'll go 2 faces lower still. Place it right here. Click there. Hit enter. And now we got this beautiful cut. And while it's still selected, we're going to do Control E, Mark C. We got some extra vertices over here. So we're going to slide that up so it's aligned with this one. We got to do the same shit down here at the bottom. Merge by distance. I got a shortcut for that. Shift W. For now, I'm not going to use that. Now we're going to select this inner area and delete all the faces there. And now we're going to start cleaning up these edges over here because we got some extra vertices. Now when you clean this up, you don't want to slide any edges which are attached to a vertical edge. If you slide this vertex down here, it's going to change the shape of the surface and it's not going to look right. But if you slide vertices which are only attached to horizontal edges on the surface like this, you can slide this as much as you want. You're not going to see no difference because this surface is flat anyway. So slide this all the way down. You can slide this one down as long as you don't move this edge left or right. The same thing over here at the bottom. Maybe we'll get rid of some of these edge loops later on, but right now let's just keep it there. This one we're going to slide down because it's easier. And I'm going to keep sliding this and clean it up a little bit. Let's also slide this one up so we don't have that very long and thin triangle down here. And now do the same shit over here at the top. We got a little bit of imperfection on these triangles down here, but it's not going to matter at the end of the day. We can make some adjustments later on if we have to. Now place the 3D cursor on this point down here. Select this entire edge loop around here. 3D cursor is still a pivot point. We're going to extrude, right click, scale to 0 with Shift Y. So we exclude the Y axis and we're going to scale that to 0. Now everything is completely aligned down here so we can merge vertices by distance again. And we're going to need some more horizontal geometry here so we can maintain the geometric density. In other words, we're supposed to have edges over here on this side which have approximately the same length as these edges down here. Same thing over here at the top. And to do that, let's first select these 2 edges and tear them with V, but right click to snap that back. We're going to add a couple of loop cuts and it looks like this number should be suitable. In my case, that's 5. It looks like 6 is going to work a little bit better. Up here, it looks like we only need 3 edges. Now you're going to use your knife tool and snap it to these vertices and just take it all the way to the side like this. Hit enter. Keep doing that with every single edge that you have over here on the side. At some points, the knife tool might not cut through because we still tore this face down here. So we're just going to delete this face and fill this in manually with F. It looks like we have an extra edge over here, so we're going to dissolve that. A good way to prevent this problem where the knife cut does not cut through some edges is this. Just delete this face where we got an end gone. Select this edge loop here and fill that with F. Now everything is connected. Now we don't have a gap here anymore. So now when you cut that shit with a knife tool, it's going to cut through every single face. And that way we can clean up the rest of this. And before you know it, we're good to go. We got a nice grid down here. We got some triangles here and there. Everything's not perfect, but it doesn't matter. Next, we're going to have to bring a circle down here. And the middle of that circle has to be perfectly aligned with this point over here on the side. So we're going to go to side view, and in wireframe, we're going to use the box select tool to select this vertex here. That's also going to select the one in the back. Shift as cursor is selected. And that circle is supposed to get very close to this edge here. So it's going to have to be pretty damn big, which means we got to go front view and take all this stuff here at the bottom where we have this bevel, and we're going to have to lower that down a little bit. Let's also add 9 more loop cuts so we keep this geometric density down here as well. Shift A, give me a circle, and only God knows how many vertices this circle is supposed to have. We're going to align that with our view here, scale it down a little bit like this, and we're supposed to be able to connect this circle with all the vertices over here, so it looks like we have a couple of extra vertices on the circle. Delete this one, and instead we're going to add a circle with 48 vertices instead of 64. Flip that sideways and scale it down. It looks like connecting this is going to be a much more reasonable procedure. So select this edge loop over here on the side of the circle, select this edge loop up here, W, bridge edge loops. Thomas Collin taught me that one of the most important things when you're trying to keep your topology clean is the flow of your face loop. So we have to make sure that when we select this face loop over here, it doesn't end up also selecting something on the back over here or some crazy shit like that. Instead, we're supposed to have this flowing nicely, so the geometry is supposed to look something like this, where you're going to be able to select this face loop and it's also going to select all these faces, and that's going to be a perfect loop. It's going to be clean. This is the type of shit you learn if you're a Thomas Collin patron, so go check that shit out. Anyway, right now I have my 3D cursor over here in the middle of this circle. I'll deselect these vertices on the inside of this little segment here, which we already filled. Then give me extrude right click and scale that up so it's almost the same width as this part right here. If we go to side view and we zoom in on this, it has to be so that if we extend this edge right here, it's going to intersect with this vertex right here. Now you can check that if you want to, but it doesn't have to be that exact. As long as it's approximately there, it's going to be fine. Now we're going to place the cursor right here with Shift S and snap this back to the corner. That way this is going to be connected. Down here we're going to place the cursor on the outside like this and scale these two edges to 0 on the x-axis. Use a 3D cursor to bring this vertex up here so these two can be connected. Do the same thing with the next vertex here, and then we're going to have to do something a little bit differently. Before we do, let's connect a few more things on the other side as well here. We're going to try and use this technique as much as we can before we have to start stretching out the faces too much. As you can see, at some point, if you want to continue to connect these vertices, you get some pretty stretched out faces, and that's going to give us a lot of trouble down the line. So instead of doing that down here, we can just take this edge loop and slide it all the way down with double G like this. That's also going to help us over here on the other side. And now we can select everything, merge by distance, place the cursor down here, and then snap this vertex to that vertex on the outside. And that's going to work a little bit better than if we would have connected this to somewhere up here. That would have stretched the hell out of this face. We have to sacrifice the geometric consistency in the back here because now we have some faces which are a little bit longer than these faces up here. We got edges which are a little bit longer than the others, but we're going to be able to clean that up later if we have to. And that's not even the most important thing, because the most important thing is that we can connect this. The face loops are flowing properly and we don't got no n-gons. Let's also connect this thing down here also on the other side now that we have the opportunity to do so. Now we can get rid of this edge loop here as well, but we want to keep in mind that we're going to have to connect this edge loop to this one down here, which means we can't keep connecting these vertices to the sides, because every time we connect another vertex here, we lose an extra edge. You see right now we have an edge here, but if we snap it, we no longer have that edge. So we have less edges on this edge loop down here, which means we might not be able to perfectly connect that with this edge loop down here at the bottom of the hole. So to make sure we don't fuck anything up, we're going to select this edge loop at the bottom, go up here to viewport overlays and check statistics. You're going to see that currently we have 16 edges selected. So if we want to be able to connect this up here, we also have to have 16 edges up here at the top. Currently we got 18, so we can remove one more edge from each side. So we're going to snap the next vertex here as well. And now when we connect everything, we can select this edge loop at the top and the edge loop at the bottom. Make sure that nothing else in between is selected. And now you see we got a total of 32 edges selected, 16 up here at the top and naturally 16 at the bottom as well. Now let's see who's smarter, Blender or me. If he can grid fill this shape right here properly, then he might have a good chance. So we're going to go to face, grid fill. Of course he fucked it up. We're going to try adjusting the span and the offset a little bit. And as you can see in this case, if we got span 8 or offset -7 it seems, then Blender manages to fill this in quite well. So we're not going to have to do it manually. Now I'm going to have to move this geometry here inwards a little bit because I'm going to have to bevel this edge on the outside later on. And since these edges on the inside are so close to this edge on the outside, I can't bevel that much. So I'm going to have to pull that geometry inwards. Here's how I'm going to do that. I'll place my 3D cursor in the middle of this edge loop at the bottom of the bevel here with Shift S. Select the inner surface of this circle here. We're going to scale that down a little bit and we're going to try to make it so that these outer vertices are perfectly aligned with this vertex here and this vertex here. We can test that by scaling it down a little bit, lifting it up on the z-axis, and now we can see that we still have to scale it down a little bit further. So let's undo, scale down a bit more. Then we're going to try again, and as you can see, that's almost perfect, so that's going to be fine. But this sharp turn down here is sickening, so we got to do something about that. First of all, let's get rid of this edge loop up here at the top. Then select this entire inner surface over here and delete the faces. We're going to place the 3D cursor on this vertex down here in the corner. Select this edge loop on the side. Scale to 0 on the x-axis. The same thing over here on the other side. Now, once again, we're going to select this and go face, grid fill. As you can see, that looks a lot cleaner now. It looks like this is not really aligned well, but we can do that very easily manually by just selecting these edge loops and scaling them to 0 with Shift X. Turns out we also got some bullshit over here at the top, so I don't know if this was really worth it, but we're already elbow deep in this shit, so we might as well just continue cleaning it up. Select this entire surface over here at the bottom, scale it to 0 on the y-axis so it's at least flat. Now these are a little bit too concentrated down here, so maybe we can just get rid of all these edge loops like this. And if we really want to keep this geometry consistent, we can add some more loop cuts, but chances are we're still gonna have to shift this up a little bit more, so maybe we don't even have to do that. Maybe we can do just one loop cut, just out of matter beginners, but this part down here is now pretty good to go. I'm gonna see if I can get rid of this edge loop over here by selecting it. Then I have to deselect the last edge, and now I can slide this without messing everything up too much. Merge by distance. That also allows me to take this one and slide it up a little bit to straighten this out, and also straighten out this part in the back, so that's pretty good. Let's also connect these vertices over here in this sharp corner at the top. Let's select this face loop at the top, F to fill, I to inset like this. I'm gonna make it so that these vertices down here in the corner are just about meeting down here. Once I do that, I can slide them together to make sure they're connected, and then merge by distance. And the reason I'm doing that is so I can get rid of this edge loop on the side here. That way my geometry is connected in such a way that when I select this face loop, it's gonna go all the way around, and it's gonna behave just like Thomas Collins said it's gotta behave. The problem is that when we get rid of that edge loop, we get a problem back here where we got an end gone. In this case, I don't feel like pondering on this for 3 days, and I think it's absolutely worth just having a triangle over here. Even though that's not technically correct, it doesn't change anything, and it's much easier than dealing with this edge loop that goes all the way around. If we sacrifice this by having a little triangle over there, we can afford to have a proper flow over here in the front, so I think that's absolutely worth it. There's probably a different way to connect this somehow to get quads only, but it doesn't matter. I'm gonna roll with this anyway. Now we're gonna take this face at the front and inset it just a little bit further. Before we do that, let's also straighten this part out using the G-stretch tool. We're gonna inset that only slightly so we can take this face loop here and delete it. That way we're gonna have a little gap between this surface and the frame. I don't know what that's supposed to be, but that's what I see in real life, so that's what we're gonna create. Now a little bit of reflection. This curve up here is not supposed to connect to a point above this edge or corner right here. It's supposed to connect to somewhere down here, and while we could probably fix that by redirecting this curve or sliding it inwards in a way that allows us to have that type of connection, it's not worth the time. This detail is so unimportant that it really doesn't matter. If you want to clean this up, we're going to select this edge segment on the side here, go to select loops, edge rings, deselect this edge in the middle. Now with all these vertical edges selected like this, you're going to go W loop tool space. That might clean it up, but you also might get some zigzag shit like this. We also get a little bit of stretching in the back, so maybe we're going to deselect these edges at the bottom. Then we're going to try again so we have a better distribution up here on the side. And to fix this zigzagging, we're going to select a little segment like this, W loop tools G stretch. Do the same thing over here. G stretch doesn't work here for some reason, so we can also just slide these vertices, or we can scale them to 0 on the Z axis so that they're aligned better. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just want to make sure it doesn't look ridiculous. We're going to select this circle and separate it with P into a new object. Take that circle and push it backwards in the Y axis. Fill it with F, extrude it inwards so it's going through this object like this. Select this object right here and generate a new Boolean modifier. Target this cylinder right here. Before you apply that, you want to duplicate all these objects again in case we fuck something up. Now apply that and get rid of this cylinder. We're going to take the face at the bottom and press X delete vertices so we also get rid of the face loop on the side. And now we got to do a little bit of Boolean cleanup. I got a migraine from Topology already, so I'm not in the mood to explain Boolean cleanup today. I got an episode dedicated to this in the Topology section of my Blender course. It's explained for beginners. Everybody's going to get it, even if you're 5th grade. Once we clean this up at least a little bit, we can extrude this out, scale it to 0 on the Y axis. We got to select this edge loop down here at the bottom, but we can't just do that using Alt right click. We got to select this face loop. In vertex select mode, deselect the outer vertex loop. Now you got the inner part selected. Do Control B. We're going to bevel this with a bevel that's got 2 segments and a shape value of 1. And now if we were to use a subdivision surface modifier, this would look pretty damn clean. We're probably not going to use a subdivision surface modifier, but we might. We'll see later. In any case, the shading around this edge is now going to be pretty good. Extrude this edge inwards a little bit like this. Place the 3D cursor in the middle of this circle over here so you can take those and extrude it and scale it to 0 on the Y axis to line it here. Select the 2 circles and go W bridge edge loops. We can get rid of this outer edge loop here if we want to. Now take this inner face loop, scale it down with Shift Y to exclude the Y axis. Extrude that a little bit further and use Alt S to give it a little bit more thickness. You can delete these 2 face loops and take these edge loops like this and bridge them as well. Now we're going to take these new edge loops that we just bridged and we're going to bevel them with Control B with just 1 segment. Extrude right click, scale to 0 on the Y axis, delete the selected faces. Merge vertices by distance. Now we're just going to select all these edge loops around the circles like this. Control B and create a bevel with just 1 segment like this. Go to select loop, select boundary loop. Control B again, this time I want 2 segments. I'm also going to bevel this edge loop over here. Same thing out here on the outside. We're not going to bevel anything else yet because that's too destructive. And since we got smooth shading, the shading is kind of shitty until we bevel everything. So we're just going to go back to shading flat. I'm going to undo all the bevels that I created here because I just realized that I fucked up. Select this inner shape, then select the middle shape, then select these outer edges over here around this circle. Scale that with Shift Y like this just to get some more thickness over here on the outside. That's going to allow me to create a new circle over here, but I'm going to scale that from the middle like this. And I'm doing this because I'm supposed to be able to take this and extrude it out, and this is supposed to stay connected down here. Now I can take these circles over here and scale them to 0 on the Y axis to line them out. triangle here. And now I can bevel everything the way I did a second ago. And we're supposed to make a little bridge connecting this surface to this one down here. I'm going to straighten out this edge loop at the bottom, align this edge loop on this circle with this one down here. Now I'll select a surface like this. We can inset that with I and delete the faces on the inside. Take these vertices from the corners and you're going to slide those downwards a little bit to make this look a bit more curved. Before we delete anything, it's probably a good idea to make sure all of this is aligned. So let's scale this to 0 on the x-axis like this. All the edge loops have to be aligned, most importantly the outer ones like this. Now I'm going to take these faces and push them outwards a little bit. Now I can delete this surface. I'll make another loop cut up here so I can connect that with this down here. Now select this edge segment and the edge segment over here at the top W bridge edge loops. And to fill in these gaps, I'm going to have to add some more geometry like this. Bridge edge loops here. Let's do a loop cut like this so we can fill this part as well with a quad. Now I want a loop cut around here so that I can fill this with a quad. Fill this manually as well. Place the cursor over here in the middle so we can select this surface and duplicate it to bring it over to the other side by scaling it to -1 over the x-axis. Correct the normals, merge vertices by distance. Select these sharp edges on the corners like this. Control B to bevel this just to fix the shading. Now that gives us a perfect little connection down here, which is also going to work well if we use a subdivision surface modifier. Now we still got to add some details down here at the bottom, but I also got to hit the gym. So after I'm done pumping iron, we can get back to modeling the rest of this part right here. Remember, this is only the first part and we got a whole bunch of other components that we got to make. So buckle the fuck up. Now we gotta go down to the bottom of the object and we gotta take a 2x4 surface on this side and a 2x4 surface on the other side. You don't have to do both at the same time. You can mirror one of these later. We're gonna extrude this out to the front like this. Scale them down a little bit on the x-axis so that they're brought closer together and so that their angle changes. Separate the selected surfaces to new objects so that we can take these edges right here and bridge them. Now we're gonna add some loop cuts so that we have some more geometric consistency. We're gonna take the edge segment in the middle and push it out a little bit further. Try to imagine how this curve is going to look if we continue it from this point and this point right here. You have to find how far it's going to be at this point right here, and that's where you have to place this vertex. And once you do that, you're gonna select the vertex at the top here and also these vertices at the beginning of this flat surface, not the ones below. You only want to select the ones at the top. I'm gonna use W loop tool's curve to turn this into a curve. As you can see from top view, that makes this shape curved. Now we're gonna do the same thing one more time down here on these other edge segments. That gives us the curve that we want to have here, but I don't want it to be this sharp. I'm going to select all this geometry and scale it down on the y-axis to make it a little bit more flat. Now because of the curve tool, the geometry here is not connected properly, so we're going to select these faces. In edge select mode, we got to deselect these edges down here and the ones on the side here. Then X delete edges. That's going to leave you with a gap here which you're going to be able to connect. So take this edge loop over here on this hole and also select the same shape over here on the curve that we just created. Then go W bridge edge loops. You got to make a hole right here, otherwise it's not going to extrude properly. We're going to get rid of the entire other side. We're just going to mirror that later on. Now select this edge loop right here and extrude it further to the front. From top view, we're going to change the shape over here by sliding this around a little bit. We got to correct the normals. We can fill this and make a loop cut right here so that we can take this hole over here and use a grid fill to fill everything. And I'm also going to push this geometry a little bit further out like this. That's going to make this bridge thing here a little bit thicker. I'll do the same thing on the inside and I'll slide these edges a little bit so we have a bit of a curve here. And once I'm done shaping this, I'm going to place my cursor at this point right here and select this entire surface. Activate the shear tool. Use the 3D cursor as a pivot point and we're going to push this down a little bit like this. And now it's probably going to be a good idea to take this edge loop over here, also on the inner area. Dissolve edges. Let's put the cursor in the middle and align this first. Then we're going to select this entire half, duplicate it, and bring it over to the other side by scaling it to -1. In this case, we also have to connect all these vertices because we have a gap here. Now take this edge loop at the bottom and extrude that inwards. And before we start beveling this, we also got to copy all of this and bring it to the other side. So I'll go to side view and I'm going to delete this entire corner right here. Place a 3D cursor in the middle, select the other corner over on this side. Shift D, right click. You can just rotate this by 180 degrees and it should connect perfectly. In my case, I got some fucked up rotation because I rotated this object in edit mode on accident. So it's like 0.0321 degrees off in some random direction. That's why you can see when I look at this from side view, it's not aligned properly. So I got to delete this geometry. I'm going to align this geometry by scaling it to 0 on the Z axis with a 3D cursor right here. And fixing this type type of shit is what makes 3D modeling worse than working at a construction site. But once we connected everything, now we can select all these sharp edges over here. Also the edges at the top like this. Also the edges at the bottom. And we also have to select these edges on the inside here. And the edges that go all the way around here. Which means you also have to continue this selection over on this side. So you gotta do everything one more time. And once you got all that selected, you can just use Control B to bevel this. Make sure to set the miter outer to arc here in the bevel menu. That's gonna give you corners like this, so you can just select this vertex and join it right here. Do the same thing on all the other outer corners that you have anywhere else on the model created by this bevel. And once you joined all your corners, you should have nice smooth shading on this part down here. Now we're gonna scale this inner circle down to about this size and give me a loop cut right here, which we're going to bevel. And in edge select mode, you're gonna select those two loop cuts and you're gonna bevel them again with Control B. Extrude those bevels inwards and delete the faces at the bottom. You can also extrude this inwards and then take this edge loop and separate it to new object. Scale that down a little bit, extrude it inwards a little bit, push it up a little bit like this. On the inside, you're gonna add a bunch of loop cuts in edge select mode so that you can bevel them with Control B. Extrude, right click, scale with Shift Z. Now you can select all the sharp edge loops on this little shape right here and bevel them with Control B. That's gonna allow you to use smooth shading properly. We're also gonna have to bevel all these edges over here. And finally, we're gonna need a hole going through the middle of this sphere up here. So we're gonna go to front view and find the vertex which is exactly in the middle of this hemisphere. A hemisphere, it's a quarter of a sphere. That vertex is going to be exactly this one right here. So place the 3D cursor right there. We're gonna add a new cylinder. That cylinder is gonna have to have, let's say, 24 vertices. We're gonna scale that down and rotate it sideways like this. It's gonna have to be a little bit bigger, so we better use 32 vertices instead. And again, we're trying to make it so that the density of the geometry on this cylinder is approximately the same as the density of the geometry on this surface down here. That way, when you use a Boolean modifier here, you're gonna be able to connect that shit. So push this all the way through, separate this to a new object. Now add a Boolean modifier to the main object again. Target this cylinder, apply the Boolean modifier. Maybe it'll be a good idea to undo a couple of steps, and before we apply this, we're gonna duplicate this so we got a backup. Now once you apply the Boolean modifier, you're once again gonna have to do a little bit of cleanup. In this case, the cleanup is very easy because we have edges on the outside which almost perfectly match with the vertices on the hole that we just created here. Once you've done that, you're gonna place the 3D cursor on this surface here on the other side. Take the circle, extrude it, scale it to 0 on the y-axis to line it with the front here. We're gonna have to bevel this here to fix the shading. And now you can try connecting this circle with this outer edge loop over here. That outer edge loop has 64 edges, but this circle has 32. Good luck trying to figure out how to do that properly. I'm just gonna take these two edge loops and bridge them. It gives me triangles, but whatever. I'm gonna inset this with I just slightly. That way I can take this edge loop and extrude it backwards. And once we bevel these edges, everything's pretty good. Now we can also bevel everything else. So let's select all these sharp edges around the rest of this object. Control B to bevel them all at the same time, because that way the bevels are gonna be consistent. All the bevels are gonna be connected. Now the first and the most complicated piece is finished. The next one is gonna be done in the next video. So make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can see the next episode when I put it out. I'm probably gonna make a playlist for all the episodes of this series, but I'll see you in the next one.